Plagued by lower prices and higher feed costs, dairy farmers throughout the nation are overwhelmed with the question of how to create efficient crops without sacrificing quality.
As a producer, you have to make sure that you're able to operate in an economically efficient way and be profitable. That's the end goal for all business. In the dairy industry, feed costs are the highest percentage of all your input costs. So dairy producers have to work hard to make sure they balance their input costs on the feed side while not sacrificing milk quality or total production.
Beets are a high-value feed alternative that can increase feed quality and positively impact operating margins.
Feed beets are selected for their high dry matter and pest and disease tolerance so that the growers that produce them and feed them have a crop that is economical for them to produce. With feed beets, they're able to bring in a crop that is very versatile in what they can use in their ration. It can substitute many different things and works well within the ration to help them manage that margin and keep their feed costs as low as possible while still maximizing the output from their dairy. The other advantage with feed beets in regards to this is that they're a non-maturing crop. So on the crop production side, you don't have to have as big a concern or risk at certain times of year. Many of the other crops, you either have to have moisture or heat at the right time or not have too much. With beets being non-maturing, this isn't an issue. They're able to weather through some really tough situations, whether it's water shortages, high temperatures. They're really hardy in that manner. The other side for the dairy producer and the grower is they're able to bring in a homegrown forage into their rotation. So they can expand their rotation that they currently have and add a homegrown forage that brings value and positive economic impact to their operation.
Beets are a fantastic feed for dairy cows. They provide a great amount of energy in the sugar and some fiber that is very digestible, so it's almost like the perfect feed. You can't feed 100% of it, but you try to feed as much as you can of it. And the leap ahead is the efficiency of the way we grow beets. Beets are more cost-effective per dry ton and per ton than growing in corn silage.
When you look at feed beets compared to other forage and grain crops, one of the big advantages they bring is they're highly digestible. Beets are 90% digestible, which is the highest level of any natural feed crops that are produced or grown.
BetaSeed, the leading sugar beet brand for growers throughout North America, has conducted research and introduced beets to dairy producers in select markets across the U.S.
BetaSeed is the industry leader in sugar beet seed production and sales, as well as research and development in the United States. And through this research and development, we have developed feed beets for dairy feed. BetaSeed prides itself in being able to provide the grower varieties that meet his needs in his specific region, because not all regions are the same across the U.S. and there are different diseases and insects issues. And BetaSeed does extensive research and testing to determine which varieties will perform the best in those particular areas to provide the best disease tolerance as well as yield potential.
Feed beets are grown in both the dairy and the beef industry. The dairy industry has really grabbed hold of it as it's a good feed stuff for them. They're able to work in their ration in many different ways. So there are several crops with swings in commodity prices that they work with. They're able to use feed beets as you could say, as a substitution or an addition in ways to help them improve their margin and be profitable.
Big advantage beets are going to give the dairy industry, in my opinion, is we're able to get more dry matter and a good quality dry matter with a lot less input. So as more dairy farmers become farmers, it gives us another option of crop rotation, and it also enables us to maximize dry matter tons for our dollars.
In addition to the fact that cows love them, beets are highly digestible. With the sugar contained in the cells, it is slowly released during digestion, providing a stable release, versus the spike often associated with other types of sugar sources used.
Feed beets are a provision of a specific nutrient, in this case a high supply of carbohydrate in the form of sugar. They're not really a forage in the fact that they do not have a high fiber content, but they do react in the rumen in a specific way that can reduce the need for as much forage.
You can feed beets fresh directly out of the field. So from harvest, they can go into your commodity barn, process them, and get them right into your TMR and into your ration. So you can start early and you can actually store them in the ground because they're a non-maturing crop. The other thing that can take place is you can harvest the beets, and in cooler climates you're able to store them for long term. And in northern climates, beets can be stored on the farm in a pile from October into January, February, and some people will try and stretch it a little farther than that. In essence, you're able to continue to feed that fresh beet product that you process. Dairymen are very innovative, so what they've done is ensile them. They'll combine them with another feedstuff to ensure that they have feed beets available 365 days a year.
The market segment concept between BetaSeed, Amity Technologies, and Puch & Company allows producers to work with all the parties they need to in order to incorporate feed beets into their operation.
We look at feed beets as a team. So BetaSeed in conjunction with Amity Technologies and Puch have joined together to be able to not only promote but bring the whole process of growing, harvesting, processing, and feeding that product to the dairyman. So when the grower wants to get into it, he can come to us and we can share with him the process of it and connect him with all of the people that may be needed in that situation. So one of the questions we often get is, how can I get into this? How can I start raising it without having to spend a lot of money? So what we've done is we've worked with growers in areas jointly amongst BetaSeed, Amity, and Puch to help them step into it. Growers will share equipment. We've also done demonstrations in many areas to help them start it and understand what needs to be done.
When I was first approached about growing beets, I immediately said, hey, this is a no-brainer. And because we had grown sugar beets whenever I was about from 10 to 15 years old, wasn't quite as easy back then to grow beets as it is now. With the technologies that in the seed, beets are very easy to grow. They're very cost-effective, low input costs as far as the amount of water. They only use a little less than 2/3 the water as a corn silage crop. So it's very efficient from the input standpoint. There isn't a lot of challenges in growing beets. So I'm now growing a good portion of what would be the same as my rolled corn. We're replacing rolled corn that I have to bring from the railroad cars. I can now grow on my farm and save some of those input costs. Tremendous opportunity for the dairy industry.
As a dairy farmer, we've really found the sugar beets to be a real help in our farming process. They're a little cheaper to grow than the corn silage, and they feed to the cows very well. The reason feed beets help us get into production at a low input cost is we don't need to change any of our equipment. We can plant them with all the equipment we already have. With the sugar beets, we're finding out that we can use less water than corn. They're cheaper to grow than corn. They require a lot less nitrogen inputs and other commercial fertilizers. They help condition the soil for the future crop, so whatever we follow them with rotationally, it saves us money, and that adds to the sustainability of the whole crop. By using less water to maximize the dry matter per ton, we have a huge advantage over other crops. Corn silage versus sugar beets in dry matter yield would be the equivalent time in the ground is the same. The corn silage, we get around 8.5 to 9 dry matter tons per acre. In the sugar beets, we're experiencing 12.5 to 13 tons of dry matter per acre with less input costs. So the sugar beets knock the socks off corn silage on a dry matter basis.
The Puch state-of-the-art beet processing line of technology includes stationary and mobile equipment for dry dirt separation, washing, destoning, and chipping of feed beets.
Puch has been involved with beet processing equipment for over 140 years. We have 3 manufacturing facilities in Germany, we have 1 in Italy, 1 in Spain, and then we have a manufacturing facility here in the United States in Asheville, North Carolina. All the equipment for the feed beet industry is manufactured here in the United States, and we can ship anywhere in North America. For the farmer, it's important to have a clean beet to get as much dirt off the beet as possible, but also separate the beets from the rocks. Working with Amity and BetaSeed and the dairy farmers, we have basically taken the equipment, the larger scale equipment from the sugar beet factory, and we've made it into a smaller version. It can either be a mobile unit or a stationary unit, but basically they're performing the same function as would a sugar beet factory. These smaller units, they process about anywhere from 80 to 100 tons of beets per hour. The sugar beet is a root vegetable. When it's harvested, it brings in a lot of rocks and dirt. So our beet master not only washes the beets, but it also separates the rocks and the stones for the beets. So it cleans them. That's our separation technology. Once the beets go through our beet master, they go into our master chipper. Now they're a clean beet, all the stones and the gravel have been separated, and so they can be chipped more easily.
From harvest to washing the beets, destoning the beets, and chipping the beets, which provides a perfect chipping end product to the farmer. This machine, we call it the Chip Master, and that was basically, we recognized there was a demand for less handling of the beets, and this is payloader driven by the hydraulic of the payloader, and this particular bucket can basically hold 2.5 tons of beets at once, and it probably takes 2 minutes to chip them into perfectly sized chips. This also has a unique feature which senses when there's a rock at the cutting drum. This counter knife, we call it, opens up and passes the rock, and as soon as the rock is passed, it goes back to the operational position. So it really allows the farmer to process beets with rocks, where the common way is separating rocks with water. This is a lot more cost-effective solution for the farmer. And then every farmer has a payloader, so it just naturally makes sense to use this type of equipment.
Because their machines are highly adaptable, Amity Technologies beet harvesters can harvest beets with leaves attached, just as good as when defoliated.
There are two different ways our machines can work. One is to defoliate the beets prior to harvesting, which takes place mostly in wetter conditions. So if you have clay soils or you harvest in the northern climate where your harvesting window is relatively short, you can basically either decide to harvest with leaves attached or with defoliated beets. The defoliated beets, so knocking the entire foliage off with a separate machine, guarantees that you have a very low dirt percentage in the tank, so in the feed. With leaves attached, you harvest at about 1.5 miles per hour, versus at defoliated beets, you harvest at about 4.5 miles per hour. So the harvest is a lot faster, but if you have the opportunity that you live in the desert Southwest, you can harvest with leaves, so therefore you can bring more nutritional value feed, more high value feed in the tank and therefore into your rations. How our harvesters increase your profit is by the lifter wheels we're using. Lifter wheels is unlike a potato harvester. We're not digging up the full ground. It's a row crop, and therefore we're using cast iron lifter wheels. They have an open throat and they're narrow towards the back. So in the forward motion of the harvester, the beets are brought in and then pinched at the bottom and lifted gently out of the ground, knocked back into the machine. So by just using those lifter wheels instead of a potato harvester, we only dig about 2.5 to 3 inches deep, and therefore minimizing fuel consumption when harvesting. Another great thing about our machines is that they are built for farmers. So they are built with a very rigid frame. They have no metric parts, so it's all English. They're easy to maintain, and all the wear parts, 90% of the wear parts can be replaced within 10 minutes of harvesting. So if something breaks down, your harvester can be up and running in a matter of minutes.
Amity has been providing harvesters locally for us to rent or use. In our case, we purchased a harvester with another farming operation and has shared those costs. So the original startup cost of growing a new crop only required the harvester at the end. In general, we've had success of 60 to 65, even 70 tons per acre as harvested with the beets, and virtually no issues to growing them.
There's a lot of economic pressure within the dairy industry, within all of agriculture. And we need to learn to do more with less. There's less tillable ground for feeding livestock and producing food. There's fewer people that are out there producing food and products for animals. We have to increase our efficiency in yielding more tons of nutrient per acre. Beets can provide a high volume of nutrients per acre per unit of water, so that what that helps to do is drive down some of the cost of our feeds to help improve the margins within the dairies and keep people eating food.
The advantage of the sugar beets on a cost and sustainability effort, anything we use where we're using less commercial fertilizer is going to benefit the environment. We're using less water with sugar beets per dry matter produced. So those are two of the biggest sustainability features. Lower cost, it's cheaper per dry ton. And I mean, that's a huge advantage to not only dairymen, but to the future of any sustainable crop. So beets, in my opinion, are going to be something that aren't just here temporarily. They're going to last. They're going to be a good thing for the dairy industry for the future.
Today, feed beets continue to help dairy farmers around the country create more efficient crops without sacrificing quality.